Hey everyone, and welcome to my channel. I wanted to do my November wrap-up today, but I have a very needy cat, so we'll see how it goes. I hope she will just be fine sitting next to me so I can film for you. Let's see, it's looking quite promising right now. So today I want to share with you all the books that I have finished in November. Before we talk about the individual books and I give you little mini reviews, I want to talk about some stats for the month that have to do with my goal of reaching a 0 TBR next year. So I'm trying to reduce the unread books I own. So let's see how I did in November with that. So we started out the year with 47 books on my TBR. We started out November with 35 books on my TBR, so we have reduced the amount of books I own during the year, and let's look at the numbers that will tell us how much I reduced it in November. So the first number that is important, and you can already tell from that number that it's not going to be an amazing month, is the amount of books that I have finished, and that was 5 books in November, which is very low for me. I usually read somewhere between 8 and 12 books a month, so yeah, November really wasn't that great. It was very busy at work, so I just didn't finish so many books. Next up, we have the number of books that I have bought, and in November I have bought 2 books. Both of those were audiobooks, so I listened to them right away. That's fine by me. And then we also have the amount of books that I have borrowed, and again that was 2 books, so 2 library books were added to my TBR. So if we take this together, 5 books read, 2 books bought and 2 books borrowed, we can see that I only reduced my TBR by 1 book in November, so that is definitely lower than I want it to be, but it is still a reduction. It is a very small one, but it is a reduction, so I'm gonna take it. So we're finishing out the month with 34 books on the TBR. So I was kind of hoping I would go under 30 maybe this year, but looking at it right now, that is not gonna happen. It's a little bit sad, but at the same time, there's just so many great books I have available through Libby with my library, so I also don't wanna, just read books I'm not in the mood for all the time. So sometimes I just want to read a library book, and spoiler alert, that will probably be the case in December as well. So that's it for the stats. Now let's talk about those 5 books. The first book I finished in November was my audiobook. It was Her Royal Spyness by Rhys Bowen. I do have a complete reading vlog where I read 1920s kind of mystery books, and I will link that down below if you're interested to watch it. But this was the last book I read for that vlog. This is not a 1920s but a 1930s mystery, but I still felt it is close enough to lump it in there. In this book, we are following a young woman who is kind of nobility, but she is like very far removed from the actual throne of England. And so while she isn't really allowed to work, she also doesn't really have any funds. And there is this plan to marry her off to this Eastern European prince that she doesn't really like she's met him and she really doesn't like him. And so she is kind of making up a plan to build up her own life so that she isn't just married off to this person. And so she goes to London alone, and she is kind of trying to build her own business cleaning houses, but while doing that she is also wrapped up in a murder case. Now with this book, I would say if you want to read it, you have to keep in mind that the actual crime doesn't happen until about halfway through the book. So there's a lot of setup where we just meet the character, we learn about how she's doing and her plan and her activities to bring that to fruition. So for half of the book I was like, is this actually a mystery or did I make that up? But it is in the end. And I must say that I think I liked all the other stuff more than the actual mystery case. I thought it was very obvious who did it, and there was also a little bit of a thing where I wasn't completely happy with the way it was resolved, because the actual perpetrator, the actual murderer, was a person who belongs to a minority group. And I just felt like even though the motive was like just money things, I still felt like that, you know, it just didn't sit quite right with me. But I just loved the tone of this so much. It was like very soothing in a way and definitely cozy. And so in the end, I gave it 3.5 stars. Then the next book I finished was a library book that I had kind of brought over from October, and that was This House is Haunted by John Boyne. This is kind of like a gothic ghost story type of book. It is more recent, but it really feels like one of those old school gothic tales. I would say that it falls into the traps of this genre a little bit too much. It sticks to the roots a little bit too much because there's a lot of problematic aspects in these tales, especially this fear of the other, this fear of foreigners, which this book plays around with as well, which I really didn't love. But basically, this book is about a young woman. She is not married and her mother has passed away a few years ago. And then at the beginning of the book, her father passes away too. And so she doesn't really have anyone in her life anymore. And she just wants to escape this reality. She's also living in London. And then she sees this ad to become a governess in a country estate. And so she thinks this is the perfect way to escape. So she goes to this estate, and when she arrives there, there is no adults. She just meets these two strange children that she's supposed to take care of now. And she tries to figure out what is going on, like where are the parents of these children while she's there. Now, in the beginning, this definitely, at first it feels a little bit funny because it just plays a little bit on Charles Dickens. Like, I think the first line is something like, Charles Dickens killed my father or something like that. So it does have a funny note at the beginning. Then it definitely gets a bit creepy as soon as she arrives in the house and things start happening. But then very quickly we kind of get into all of the explanations. So that's usually when things are not creepy to me anymore. This also has a very ableist plot line in it, and yeah, it's just overall, I just felt like this doesn't really add anything new. It is just kind of copying those classic gothic stories. It also really reminded me of the TV show The Haunting of Bly Manor. So if you liked those vibes, you might like this horror as well. But I feel like Bly Manor has such deeper themes, and it just explores grief and love in such a profound way that this book does not reach at all. So overall, I gave it 3.5 stars as well. Then next up, I finished another library book, and that was Bookshops and Bonedust by Travis Baldree. This is the prequel to Legends and Lattes, which I had really loved, and I just realized November was a month where I needed comforting books. You probably can guess why. So that was exactly what I got with this one. In this prequel, we follow the same main character, we still follow Viv, but she has just started out with this kind of group of mercenaries, and they are fighting an evil person. And this evil person is kind of a necromancer, so she can bring dead bodies to life and have them fight for her. So that's kind of the scenario. And in this battle that we see at the beginning of the book, Viv gets injured because she's just a little bit too over enthusiastic and not thinking about her own mortality too much. So she gets injured quite badly, and so the rest of her people, they bring her to this very small coastal town, and they're like, yeah, you just stay here, you get better, and when we have defeated this evil person, we will come back here and pick you back up when you have healed. So she's just stuck there. She can't really do anything, she can't really go anywhere, and so she strikes up some friendships and things unfold. And I really enjoyed this prequel. I had a lot of fun with it. I especially empathized with the character that has the bookstore. I thought that was just, yeah, I don't know, just a character that I could connect with a lot. So this was just very wholesome, but it had some stakes, definitely. And in the end, I decided to give this 4 stars. It didn't have quite the amazing charm of the first book for me, but it was still really, really good, and I would recommend it if you think about picking it up. I also just really enjoyed how this book portrays, relationships that are not made to last, that they're still valuable, because I moved towns quite a lot because of my job, and I'm very bad at keeping friendships alive once I have moved to a different city. So I don't know, it just like really touched me, this idea that still the relationships I have right now, even though they might not last for my whole life, they might not be my happily ever after, they're still valuable. And that just really touched me in a way. Then I finished another book from the library, and that was Somewhere Beyond the Sea by T.J. Klune. This book also just won the Goodreads Choice Award in Fantasy, which honestly I don't really see. I don't really understand why, but that's alright. This is the sequel to The House in the Cerulean Sea, so I was quite excited to pick it up. Again, I was looking for something that would be soothing and comforting, and this book did not really do that for me. I just expected more of what we got in the first book, and I think the second book is quite different. At the beginning of the book, we have Arthur and Linus, the main couple of the series, go back to the city where Linus came from in the first book, and they're having this hearing with some politicians, and basically it's all a setup. There is a certain politician who wants to gain more power, and so she's trying to use Arthur to kind of display how dangerous magical people are so that she can move up the political ladder with that with these policies that will not help magical people have the same rights, basically. So from the get-go, this was exactly not what I wanted, especially with the things that are going on in this world right now, especially in the US, but also in other parts of the world. This was just not what I was going into this book for, and it's not the book's fault, it's my fault for expecting basically the same thing as with the first book. But yeah, that just hit me all the wrong ways, and when I read this scene, I was taking a bath, so I also didn't really have alternatives. So I just read it even though it made me feel so uncomfortable. And then we go back to the island, and this politician woman, she sends someone to again kind of take stock of the orphanage, and that person is so Umbridge coded that it was painful to read, and I actually thought about DNFing the book because I do not DNF books. But it was so hard to read, so it took me a very long time to read this because I just never really could bring myself to pick it up. Now in this book, this person gets a lot of pushback from our characters, so that made it bearable. But I feel like with everything that was built up in this book, the ending really just didn't resolve it in my view. It was, I don't know, it was just very fast and not realistic in my opinion. So I just didn't really love the ending as well. So in the end, I gave this book kind of like 3.75 stars, and most of that was really the nostalgia for these characters that I love, and especially for Theodore, who's my favorite of the series. But yeah, I don't know. There were like some really beautiful scenes in there. There is a scene where Arthur is flying and with Fee, and that was so beautiful, but like the overall feel of the book was just not what I was looking for this month. Then next I finished my big project for the month, and I do have a complete reading vlog for this book. So if you want to hear all of the thoughts that I could have possibly had while listening to it, you can go and check it out. I will link it down below. And that was Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. This was the final book of my 5 authors I wanted to try this year list, and it was quite the big one. It took me most of the month to finish this one. I listened to the audiobook, and in this one we are following an magical England, but magic is not practiced anymore. Magicians are people who study magic theoretically, but they do not you know, practice magic. And we have two people, first of all Mr. Norrell and then later on Jonathan Strange, who can practice magic, and they're trying to bring magic back to England. This is set in the beginning of the 1800s, so we have the Napoleon War in the background of the story, and we also have like everything that comes with it. We have some references to the racism of the time. We have a lot of like references to the expectations for gender roles during the time, but all in kind of a mindful way. So not just like reproducing these things, but also showing the restrictions of these things and just discussing it a little bit more. I think that could have been done more, but for a book that came out in the 2000s, I think it's doing a really good job. Now this book is very strange because it is very, very long, but it doesn't have like peaks of interest. This is a book that just flows on, and I feel like from the first page till the last page, it is always kind of interesting, but it's just, there is no highs and no lows in this story. And so it just all feels kind of samey, but not necessarily in a bad way. But it is a unique reading experience that I think, depending on what kind of reader you are, you might enjoy more or less. For me personally, I am a character-driven reader, so I would have liked to get a better grasp, especially on the two main characters, Mr. Norrell and Jonathan Strange. I felt like for all of this book, my emotional connection to these characters was very weak, just because I didn't really understand them as people. I didn't really understand what they were interested in, why they were doing the things they were doing. Like in a like bigger, more abstract sense, I could see it, but it never felt like personal, you know what I mean? So yeah, I was struggling a little bit with that, but there were definitely characters I was very interested in. We do have one black character, Stephen Black, and he is a servant, but he gets sucked into some fairy magic that he really doesn't want to have anything to do with, but he just can't get out of it again, you know, because the fairies just won't let him go. And similarly, we have some other characters, some female characters that I enjoyed reading about. And then also, I think still my favorite character is Childemus, who is the servant to Mr. Norrell, but is he a servant? Question mark. I really enjoyed his role in everything. It was very, very intriguing as well. But so yeah, I did like this book. You can hear much more about it in my vlog. And overall, I gave it 4 stars. And with that, we have come to the end of this video. I hope it was enjoyable to watch. I hope you maybe found a book to check out or to avoid. I would love to hear what you think about Somewhere Beyond the Sea winning the Goodreads Choice Award in the fantasy category. Let me know your thoughts. Do you think another book should have gotten it? And with that, I'm gonna say goodbye. Thanks for watching this video, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye!